Facts. Yeah, facts. We tell you facts. All the facts.
Hello, friends. Uh, Today we're talking about Octavia Butler, and they're super interesting. Like, genuinely, I don't sound genuine when I say it because it's a problem that I have. But I genuinely mean like they're super interesting. I was like, wow, oh my God, I wish they were still alive because it would have been super cool to meet them. I don't know if we ever would have gotten to, but it would have been really cool. But I'd like to thank Book Riot for their very thoughtful overview of Octavia and their life. Book Riot had an article titled "Who is Octavia Butler" by Sarah Rahman, and they did a lot of research. They organized this like beautifully, honestly. Like a lot of the information I got from there, it was not only thorough, but they really like organized it in a very easy to understand way that was super interesting. So thank you for creating that, Sarah. But I want to open with a quote from Octavia Butler that says, "I am a 47-year-old writer who can remember being a 10-year-old writer and who expects someday to be an 80-year-old writer. I am also comfortably asocial, a hermit in the middle of Los Angeles, a pessimist if I'm not careful, a feminist, a Black woman, a former Baptist, an oil and water combination of ambition, laziness, insecurity, certainty, and drive," which I just thought was like such a fantastic quote because what a great combination of things. I honestly, in my life, oftentimes feel like oil and water combination of traits as well. So I was like, that's so neat. And
Yes.
also, like, someone who wrote as many amazing books to classify herself as lazy, I'm like,
It's like, what am
you
I
are.
doing then?
I've written 0 books and you're killing it, you know? But yeah, they're super interesting. Their full name was Octavia Estelle Butler, which I love. I love their middle name so much. Their parents were Larice and Octavia M. Butler. They were born in Pasadena, California on June 22nd, 1947. Octavia Jr. went by Estelle to everyone but her mother, who called her Junie. Growing up, her mother worked as a domestic worker and cleaned houses for a living. Octavia would go to work with her mother sometimes, and they witnessed their mother being disrespected by their employers. They would feel reasonable anger at witnessing this, but were more frustrated by the fact that their mother didn't stand up for themselves than at the people who insulted them. Her mother and her actually bonded a lot over reading, which makes a lot of sense considering that Octavia wrote like 12 novels. But they bonded a lot over reading, specifically the Bible together, and her mother was very passionate about Octavia's education. Her mother would bring her lots of books that she got from places that she worked. This started Octavia's love of books, and she got a library card at the age of 6. Octavia had 4 brothers, all unfortunately that died before she was born, and she often wondered what would have been like if they had lived. She used books as a way to escape and create worlds, spending lots of time in her mind. This will make a lot more sense later when I get into a lot of why she spent so much time in her mind and how that actually really influenced their love of books. Reading so many books made it easier for her to create stories, spending, as I said, lots of time in her mind. She started to tell herself stories when she was at the age of 4 years old. But because you don't have the memory that lasts forever, when she turned 10, she wrote a lot of them down so that she would not forget them. And by the age of 13, which will make you feel horrible about yourself, at the age of 13, she was sending her stories out to publishers.
Oh my God.
Right? Right?
Get it done, Gabe.
I was like, all my life, I've never seen anything I've written. It's just so great. Like she's just so cool, honestly, in reading all of the stuff about her life. But yeah, at 13, she was sending her stories out to publishers. She did not get any of them accepted, but just like such a cool move, just like confidence.
Yeah, the confidence.
Yeah. And it's like cool that like her mom instilled that love of writing and books and everything else just into her so strongly that she was like, heck yeah, I'm going to go submit my work at 13 to publishers. It's really cool. But writing was her passion, obviously, and she realized this when her mother suggested that she could be a writer. She knew it was a career option, but she just knew she liked writing. She never really thought of it as something that she could like make her life around. And then her mom suggested, like, you could be a writer. And she's like, what? Okay, yeah, I want to do that 100%. So after that moment, being a writer is what Octavia wanted. Her mother brought her bought her first typewriter, which was a portable Remington. And apparently, her family wasn't the most supportive, unfortunately, in her pursuing writing as a career. Her mother was the most accepting of it, but many people didn't see writing as a practical Many people didn't see writing as a practical occupation. Her mother wanted her to get a job as a secretary and be able to sit while working, which, considering how Octavia's mom spent the most of her life working on her feet with her hands, that like she wanted her daughter to have a more relaxing career experience, and something that was really interesting to her, but also like paid a good amount of money. So there were times in her life where she could have pursued those kinds of careers, but they just didn't interest her. The article recounts an interview with Jane Burkett where Butler stated that those careers all sounded like levels of hell to me. It was Butler's experiences with other people as well that influenced her desire to write. Something that I thought was super interesting, although sad, was that she really felt out of place as a kid and didn't relate to her peers. There were times when she was bullied by other kids until she learned to fight back, but she didn't like doing so because she didn't enjoy hurting other people, which very much reminds me of the hyper empathy in Parable of the Sower. In fact, a handful of things I read in the article reminded me of Lauren from Parable and the Sower in the way that Octavia spoke about her life. So I'm sure there's probably some overlap there. As we've said before, you can't really separate the art from the artist. Like your personality and your views and who you are overflows into what you write. Blah, blah, blah. I'm here. In fact, a handful of things I read in this article reminded me of Lauren in Parable of the Sower in the way that Octavia spoke about her life, specifically her understanding of her perception of her appearance and how others would masculinize her and her physical traits. This is something Lauren spoke of and even used to her advantage when traveling north, disguising herself as a man because it was safer. The opinions of other people did bother Octavia a lot, and she described adolescence as the one time in her life when she actually felt suicidal. This influenced her to isolate herself and not engage with people her age, and it also affected her desire to escape through books, libraries, and writing. It was a place where she could create a different world as well as make sense of a society and how people act. In an interview in 1997, she spoke on these experiences and how that pushed her to write. She says, because of this, because I was so ostracized and because I was so shy, writing was a real refuge for me. So in that sense, I guess you could say my body helped make me a writer. This influenced how she took in the world as well. When between projects, she would spend a lot of time at the library and would browse through sections she'd never been in before. If she found something interesting, she would take it home and read it. But if there wasn't anything interesting, she'd put it away after a few pages, but she would intentionally find sections of the library that like she had never been before to see different genres and experience different styles of writing. All this tied back to kind of honing in on their literary skills. So one thing that's like really cool about Octavia is that like literally almost everything she did kind of tied back to her overall dream of wanting to be a writer. Spending time alone didn't bother Octavia so much as she got older, and she was able to accept herself the way that she is. She says, I like spending most of my time alone. I enjoy people best if I can be alone much of the time. I used to worry about it because my family worried about it. And then I finally realized this is the way I am. That's that. We all have some weirdness, and this is mine. Octavia apparently also had dyslexia and claimed that this caused her to read very slowly. She would need to read slowly enough to be able to hear the words in her mind and picture things. So they fell in love with audio tapes for this reason. Butler said to Charles Rowell in 1997, describing their love of audio tapes, I find it delightful. I learn so much more and better if I hear tapes. I recall when I was a little girl being read to by my mother. Even though she was doing the domestic work that I talked about, she would, during my very early years, read to me at night, and I loved it. It was, again, theater to the mind. As someone who has a similar struggle with reading, in that I also read very slowly, more from a cognitive processing standpoint, but it's just neat to know that Octavia Butler and I have something in common.
I also read Parable the Sower and Talents using audiobook. So that's
yeah,
like so awesome.
Yeah,
She's like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And it's so good. So good.
No, exactly. And I mean, it was like, it seems similar that like schooling kind of like ruins the love of reading initially because it's all done for like tests and strict time limits, and it's like way easier to read Spark Notes if you're reading for that reason instead of just like I love books, I want to learn stuff. So it was really through the series, honestly, that restored my love of reading, and it was ebooks that made it so that I was able to read. So it's almost like accessibility is important or something.
What?
I know, right? It's so crazy. But as Octavia got older, they discovered different styles of writing as well as their like niche. Octavia got into science fiction after watching the movie Devil Girl from Mars and thought she could write a better story than that. After watching it, she was like, I could do better than that. And I'm going to do that
all the time.
Exactly. So it's just like, I could write a better book than this person. So I'm going to go do that. So she turned the movie off and just started writing. So Gabe, next time you feel that, you should just stop what you're doing.
Do it. Yeah.
Just write stuff.
Called me out.
Yeah. So that was the first time they tried to write science fiction. And it was what activated her career was when, like after this, she was admitted into the open door program at the Screenwriters Guild. And in this program, she met one of her mentors and friends, Harlan Ellison. Ellison encouraged Octavia to attend the Clarion Science Fiction Writers Workshop, where they met Samuel R. Delany, who was another one of their mentors. From attending the Clarion Science Fiction Writers Workshop, they sold their first short story, Crossover, to the Clarion Journal, and it was published in 1970. After this success, they were unable to get anything published for 5 more years. So during this time, Octavia entered into an array of odd jobs to support herself, specifically like washing dishes, sweeping floors, going through warehouse inventory, sorting potato chips, and so on. This is actually something that I read was also incorporated in Kindred and the many jobs that they had. A lot of the jobs that they mention are jobs that Octavia actually worked herself. So it's kind of cool. In the meantime, in this 5-year period where, they're struggling to get stuff published, every night at 2 or 3 a.m., they woke up and just started writing, which is crazy. But the article specifically says Butler liked to write in the early hours of the morning when it was still dark out. This was true for the 10 years that she worked temporary jobs between 1968 and 1978. Although she purchased a computer in later years, she still preferred writing on a typewriter. She loved writing when it rained. Later on in her career, she would come up with a routine, taking a walk between 5:30 and 6:30 a.m., doing work around the house, sitting down to write at 9 a.m., and cutting time out later in the day to read. So as I said, honestly, like everything that they did looped back to their love of writing, which is just very cool. And also the dedication to wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to write. And I think it kind of ties back to the fact that sleep isn't real. Like our sleep schedule, like it isn't real. Yeah. So if you feel awake, just get up and do something that's going to make you tired instead of staring at the ceiling.
Yep. Like be proactive about it.
Yeah. So that's what Octavia did. At 2, 3 in the morning, she was like, I'm all right. But this all kind of shifted her kind of doing odd jobs and having to put like the writing time at 2 in the morning all shifted when they got fired from one of their jobs in 1974, and they decided to take the plunge. Novel writing seemed really intimidating because of the length, but Octavia kind of shifted her perspective on how to approach it through looking at every chapter as if it was a short story. And with this method, she finished Pattern Master within months. She submitted the novel to Doubleday, and it was published in 1976. After this, her career really started to take off. She published 4 novels, 1 per year, and in 1980 published Wild Seed. The early novels from Butler were the same stories that she had in her mind at the age of 12, which is why she was able to complete them so quickly. And also it's like really just like a neat fun fact. Like this is stuff she has been thinking about since she was 12 years old, and turned them into novels, like never let go of those ideas and published. I mean, obviously refined, but it's just kind of cool. The ones that followed were created from her adult mind, so they took a little bit more time to unpack. Octavia Butler wrote 12 novels and 9 short stories in her lifetime. Well, that got published specifically. Her life experiences were integrated into her writing, and these experiences are what made many of these books so amazing. Their perspectives on the world are something very unique and powerful. in the Book Riot article, they said that Butler taught, and when she taught, she told her students, if something didn't kill you, you would probably wind up using it in your writing. This reminds me of in our F the Patriarchy series, where we spoke about how who we are is always in our art. You can't separate them. Or to quote Parable of the Sower, all you touch, you change. All you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. On Octavia Butler's website, there is an overview of their impact. While they passed on February 24th, 2006, it was during this time that their books actually really started to rise. And in recent years, their sales have increased enormously because of their relevance today. Octavia's work is taught in over 200 colleges and universities nationwide. Apparently, Ava DuVernay is developing the novel Dawn, into a television series.
That is so exciting.
Right? And there's apparently also an opera based on Butler's novel Parable of the Sower that was a part of the Public Theater Under the Radar Festival and toured worldwide in 2018. Also pretty neat. Also, Amazon Studios and Juvie Productions, which is Viola Davis and Julius Tennant's production company, are developing a drama series from Butler's Patterness series, beginning with Wild Seed. And the series is being co-written by Nnedi Okorafor and Winori Kahui, who will be also directing that. So that's also very exciting. The last thing I kind of want to say about Octavia is that they won a lot of awards, and that's really cool. So between 1980 and 2018, they won 12 awards, which is huge. It seems that luckily most of the awards that they did receive did happen during their actual time of being alive. 3 of them not. But most recently, they won the Eisner Award for Best Adaptation from Another Medium for Kindred, which is specifically the comic version of it, because I guess we've got them recognized in different mediums, and also the art is pretty cool. In 2012, they won a Solstice Award for Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers in America. 2010, they were the inductee Science Fiction Hall of Fame. And they won a lot of other awards specifically for novels. So they won multiple awards for Best Novelette, which is just really awesome. And they also got a MacArthur Genius Grant, which is pretty
nice.
But yeah, they're really awesome. That's the moral of the story. That's my 2 cents.
You're sticking to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love hearing about her life, and just it is super inspiring. And I feel like even though some of her works can be so depressing, there's also a line of hope in possibility, because even though she was very aware and that she was triggered and by events that were happening in real life to do something about it, but it was it wasn't oh my God, this is awful, everyone needs to know about it. It was, oh my God, this is awful, everyone needs to know about it so we can do something about it.
Yeah, and I think that's also just the lens that changes, where it's Black people in America have known America's been horrible for a really long time. People who've been looking at humanity for as long as humanity is know that it's been horrible forever. It's not news, it's not wow, suddenly everything is the worst.
Yeah.
So you have a different angle to it that is honestly significantly better and more productive, in that it's not just doom and gloom, the world is ending now. The world has been ending this entire time, so continue to try to change it. And that's something I really love about Parable of the Sower, because it's so depressing, but also so actionable and empowering, where you're yeah, everything sucks, but we can actively do stuff.
Yeah.
All
and
the
it's
time.
Feels so much like our show. Such an inspiration. And I will say, I also love hearing that over 200 colleges teach her works, because that's when I was first introduced to her, was in college. We had to read it. We had to read Kindred for a class, and I was floored. I was I had no idea she existed. I loved that teacher. I hate that I can't remember his name right now. And I just really enjoyed this exploration. It was one of my first forays into Afrofuturism, or just Black speculative fiction. And so I was whoa, that's there, that exists. This whole time I wasn't no one told me about it. And I think I wrote my whole paper about Octavia Butler specifically, and
Yeah.
like writing like other writers like her writing
Hmm.
that, because I was like, this is too cool. Everyone needs to talk about it.
Hmm.
I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? And
Yeah.
that's just because I came from a very sheltered world. So
Yeah. Well,
Florida.
that's why we're doing the series, 'cause it's so cool and everyone should know about it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. No. Now that I know I can read in this medium, and I'm really thankful for this series for that reason. In that I'm like, wow, I can read, which sounds silly, but it's like I really could only read a line. So like I was like, I don't know, I can't read books because they hurt my eyes and they make my neck hurt from looking down. There's like a handful of reasons. I don't remember what's being said, but
Yeah.
accessibility features like the internet and like audiobooks make it so that's possible. So now I'm like a huge Octavia Butler fan. I want to read everything they've ever written, ever. And a bunch
Yeah.
of other books probably from the series. So
I agree. I'm trying to see who who narrates
the books, the
the books.
ebooks. And if anything, you're reading it in the chosen way that Octavia would have loved the most because you're reading
Yeah.
it in ebooks.
The audiobook that I'm reading, Parable of the Sower and Talents, is narrated by Lynn Thigpen, and they're amazing. And in
Yeah.
Parable of the Talents, because there's three voices that you're hearing. You're hearing Lauren, her daughter, and then their husband. And so every now and again, there's like two other voice actors who are in there, but the primary one, like, it's phenomenal. It's so
Yeah.
good. Just like Lauren Oya Olamina. I'm like, oh my God, so cool.
Yeah.
So I get very excited. And I will say, like, similar to her growing up, my love of books started because I had an aunt who would read books to me at night. And we actually read Harry Potter, but I like having her and having that connection, like that was our thing. That she would read
Yeah.
to me at night, and like being able to hear the story and envision it. I was like, whoa, books are really cool.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like, books
actually
are
like
awesome.
scientific. Like that's like one of the highest leading ways to get someone to read is to read to them. And children they get read to are like twice as more likely to like one learn how to read in a developmentally
Hmm.
appropriate time, but also will like have a love of books that is deeper than if you just never get read to. It's
So real.
apparently science, which is cool.
Hmm. Yeah, I used to read to my sister. She loved it. Yeah. Favorite book was James and the Giant Peach. It was her
Mm.
favorite story.